Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 29th episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. Today, we're reviewing the 80s martial arts action classic, Bloodsport. Bloodsport was released in 1988, directed by Newt Arnold, and stars the man, the myth, the legend, Jean-Claude Van Damme. This movie follows a U.S. soldier who travels to Hong Kong to compete in the Kumite, the ultimate test of fighting skill. Now, let's just jump right into this. This movie has that 80s vibe all over it. Anybody who grew up with this movie, who who's a fan of 80s, especially 80s action or fighting movies, martial arts movies, you probably love this film. Because this film drips with the 80s. Anybody who was born in the late 70s or mid 70s probably loves this movie. This is a nostalgic film, and I'm sure it's a nostalgic film for a whole lot of people. Van Damme as an actor is just a nostalgic actor. Van Damme, people love Van Damme in the 80s and the 90s, man. He was one of the highest paid actors back in the day. Van Damme, man, he was doing his thing. He was freaking jacked in this movie. Big, shredded, man. He was huge in this film. Van Damme, man. He's either you're a Van Damme fan or you're not. Like, when you watch a Van Damme movie, you have certain expectations. You know some things you're going to see in a Van Damme movie. You know you're going to see him with a shirt off. All right. You know you're going to see him fight somebody. Okay. You know you're going to hear that velvety accent. And you know Van Damme's likely going to be the hero. So going into this film, if you've never seen it and you go into this movie, you already can kind of predict in the first 10 minutes how the entire film is going to go. But that is okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. That works for a film of this caliber. Okay. That works for a movie of this particular kind. Certain movies like this, you want to be predictable. Okay. You don't want people to try to push the envelope with a film like this one. And if you've seen the movie, you understand what I mean by that. And if you've never seen it, if you watch it, you will quickly understand what I mean by that. But the plot here in this film is very, very simple. Okay. You got Van Damme. He's a U.S. soldier, even though he clearly isn't from the U.S. These guys are trying to get him not to go to Hong Kong and fight in the Kumite because he's valuable to them. They said they invested a lot of money into him. And he's going to compete, of course. And he meets this guy and they become besties. And as soon as you meet them and you see who the more villain type fighters are, you can fully figure out exactly how the movie is going to go from that point on. But that takes nothing away from the film because you gotta watch it for the action. Now, the action in this movie, all right, now, when I was a kid and I watched like action movies like this, I thought this was the coolest stuff ever. Thought it was nothing that could beat it. I remember I was about, I think I was 6 or 7 years old when I first saw Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. I thought that was the coolest thing I ever seen, man. It was so dope. Bruce Lee was going so hard. Jim Kelly, like, it was awesome. The action in that movie, which is much older than this movie, is so much better. The fighting in this movie is insanely fake. The choreography is so bad, but it's so bad it's good. I'm sorry, when you watch this now, you are going to crack up watching the fights. And if you're seeing this for the first time now, you are absolutely going to laugh. You're going to laugh hysterically because there's sequences where guys get punched in the chest and spit blood all out their mouth and their head turns all sideways like they got kicked in the face, but they got punched in the chest. It's hilarious. I don't even know how to describe it. Now, funny enough, the film I was just talking about, Enter the Dragon, one of the fighters in that movie is the main bad guy in this movie, and he is freaking huge. This guy is enormous. I mean, his chest, his chest literally looks like his pecs. They look like someone's entire torso. It is nuts. You wouldn't believe it. This guy's arms, he had to have 28-inch biceps easy. This guy was huge. But even him, this guy, everyone in it is just so, there's so much of what they represent. In the best way possible, though. There's an odd innocence to this movie, even though it's hella violent. There's an odd innocence to this movie that's almost childlike. And when you watch this film today, you know, it's got like it's got all the typical cliche martial arts movie stuff in it. All of it. And I'm not gonna tell you guys it because I do think you should watch it if you've never seen it. But this movie has some crazy innocence to it. And it was a success when it came out, man. This movie was huge in its time. People still love Bloodsport. People talk about it all the time. I was talking about it a couple of weeks ago with somebody and it made me want to watch it. So people love Bloodsport. Now, is that to say that this movie doesn't have tons of flaws? This movie is flawed from start to finish. It's got one of the most basic, predictable plots ever. Anyone could have wrote this movie. Okay, anyone. The dialogue is horrible. The acting is terrible. Forrest Whitaker is easily the best actor in this movie. And he's not even like a main character. I mean, he's in it. He's in the whole movie, but you don't see him that much. But when he's on screen, it's clear he's the best actor in this movie. Everyone is terrible, especially Van Damme. Van Damme is definitely one of the worst actors coming out of the 80s. Van Damme was not a good actor, but he gave performances and he had the skills, man. He was built, handsome, freaking had the karate down. Like Van Damme had all the attributes, man. He had the ego, he had everything. He had everything it takes to be a movie star, except the acting talent. But all that's overshadowed when everything else falls into play. Van Damme's movies made money. They're classics now. But everything in this movie is so cheesy. It's just insane. It's like it almost feels like a parody movie. Like it almost feels like a movie parodying an 80s karate film. That's how cheesy and bad the acting and stuff is in here. But having said all that, this movie is fun. This is definitely a movie you throw on with the homies and y'all will laugh. If you're having some drinks or whatever, you guys will have a good laugh. You'll get hyped up. You'll root for Van Damme. You know, you're going to get stoked. It's a fun movie, man. It's fun. It's so bad. It's good. It's really one of those type of films. And I really do suggest 80s movie. If you're a fan of 80s movies, I definitely think you should watch this. If you're not a fan of 80s movies, stay away from this movie at all cost, okay? But if you like 80s movies, especially 80s action, definitely check this out. It's a fun time. So, overall, I'm going to give Bloodsport a 6.9 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching my review. Let me know what you think of Bloodsport in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.